The good news is this is one of the best video game movies I've ever seen. Bad news is that doesn't mean anything. Hey everybody, this is the post-Geek Out reaction for Ratchet and Clank. I am Aaron, this is Michelle.
Hello.
And yes, for anybody who has never turned into a post-Geek Out reaction, this is not a review. This is just our honest thoughts after we have seen this geeky thing. And in this case, it's the Ratchet and Clank movie. And that means full spoilers because, as I said, we're not reviewing it. This is just us talking about how we felt about it. And that includes talking about specific scenes. I'll go ahead and say I love the Ratchet and Clank games. I only played the first 3 of them. I kind of fell off from there, but that's just simply because I started getting into different video games, and now I'm back into platformers, but it's, I just never got back into Ratchet and Clank. You played through the first one, I think?
I think the first or second one, but it was a while ago.
It was, it's been a long time for both of us. But I loved it.
Yes,
I did love it.
It's very enjoyable.
I do remember absolutely loving it, so I do have an attachment to this franchise. And I had really high hopes for this movie because many of the people working on this movie actually did work on the video games. And I've always said that one of the biggest problems when it comes to video game movies is that you just hand them to people who don't care about it. You just hand these off to people who have no attachment to the franchise at all. They don't even know the backstory. They don't even know these characters. And I will say that is something in here that I can instantly point to as being maybe not better than all of them, but better than most video game movies, is that I felt the characters actually were those characters. We'll go ahead and start by just giving you guys the plot synopsis. As I said, we're going to go into full spoilers, but for now I'll just give you the basic story of it. Is that Ratchet is a mechanic. He's living out on this desert planet, and he always dreamed of doing something big. He always wanted to be part of the Galactic Rangers, which are the big, basically, space superhero team out there, which is led by Captain Quirk, who is this big, muscle-bound guy who shoots first, asks questions never, and is pretty dumb. And then one day, this little tiny robot crash lands on his planet. This robot came from, I'm gonna need to look up some of these names because it's been years since I've played this, and the movie that I saw last night did not leave a big enough impact on me for me to remember them. But yeah, there's this guy, Chairman Drek, who is a business tycoon kind of guy. Is it ever explained?
I don't know.
I remember in the game, he was like a business guy, and he's wearing a suit. So, but yeah, in this movie,
I wasn't sure if he was like a business guy or like a politic or...
Yeah, it's never really explained. Which that's another problem that we'll get into with this. But yeah, this little robot came from the factory that was being run by Chairman Drek. And Chairman Drek has been blowing up all of these planets because he's trying to take pieces of these planets, put them together to create his own perfect world. And because Clank, the little tiny robot, was a defect and wasn't willing to work for him, and was also super tiny while all the other robots were super big, he escaped. And he has all the knowledge of all these plans, so he's trying to get to the Galactic Rangers in order to give them these plans, and so he teams up with Ratchet, and then Ratchet ends up coming in and impressing them, and he becomes a member of the Galactic Rangers, and hijinks ensue. So yeah, that's the basic story. And as we said, we already kind of covered one of my first big problems with this, is that, I don't really know what Chairman Drek does, and that's kind of because they just skip over it quickly. That's what this entire movie is. This entire movie is, we know how this goes. Come on, A, B, C, D. We know how to do a film. Because there's so many moments in here in which I was just like, shouldn't you guys have talked about that? How did that work? Why are we doing this now? How do you know that? How did you not know that? This story really feels like a kid wrote it, and I don't mean that as in kids don't know how to make movies. It feels like somebody who has seen movies and is like, I know how a story works. You go from this point to this point, you gotta have this scene in there. Cool, done. It's like, no, you actually have to work from one moment to the next. Because there were so many moments in there which I was like, so this is just happening right now? Like, Ratchet has to get permission from his boss at the garage, played by John Goodman, oddly enough. It's like, that's really, to me, just felt like you didn't need to get someone that big for that. One of the things I have to applaud this for is that Ratchet, Clank, and Quark are all voiced by the people who voiced them in the cartoons. In the video game. I was like, that's an awesome touch because those guys really work good in those roles, especially Quark. Well, actually, especially all of them. I was about to say, like, all three of them are perfect for those roles. But yeah, John Goodman voiced his boss for some reason. But he has to get permission from him to go to this audition to be for the Galactic Rangers. And then he doesn't get it. He comes back, he's all sad. The boss is like, oh, poor kid. And then that night he discovers Clank, and then he is just immediately out there with Clank to go and meet the Galactic Rangers. They go in, they save the day, and then they immediately make them Galactic Rangers. And then we never see the boss again throughout like half this film. And I was like, so this is like the only guy you know in your life. Because you live out there by yourself in this garage. He's the only like other person you actually talk to. He's your boss, for crying out loud. Yeah. You just left. That's it. No words or anything. It's like, that's kind of what, I know you might say, like, oh, well, that's a small thing. It's like, that's kind of what this entire film was to me. Is that it's like, well, he's now going to be a Galactic Ranger. And he's a Galactic Ranger. Well, now they're going to go to this spaceship. Now they're on that spaceship. And I was like,
yeah, it's like the first third of the movie feels very rushed because they just want to get to all the action parts. It seems like
I kind of felt like it was even rushed beyond that.
Yeah, I guess so.
But it's especially kind of in that first third.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, this is a disappointment to me. It really is. It's not bad. I'll go ahead and say that. I think it's passable.
Well, like you said, it's definitely like the better video game-based movies, but it's not as great as we hoped it would be. But it's definitely a big step towards, better video game movies.
Honestly, I would say it's a step in the right direction.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Because you could tell that these people knew what the thing is that they were making.
Right.
They just didn't give it to very talented people, because the people who made this also made Escape from Planet Earth, and I want to say also Freebirds. Escape from Planet Earth, I've watched little bits of it, and it is not good. Freebirds we watched all of, and I was like, I like the Woody Harrelson character, but aside from that, there's nothing in this film. Like, it's really bland, and it did surprise me that this is from those same people, because when I watched those two films, all throughout, I was like, I don't know if that was meant to be a joke. Like, there were so many lines in both those films in which I was like, it's not like I'm growing at. It's not like I'm looking at that and going, oh, that was supposed to be a joke, but it was terrible. There were so many moments in which I was like, I don't know if they wanted me to laugh at that. I don't know if that was actually a joke. And I kind of had that throughout this as well. There are some good jokes.
Oh, yes.
I laughed about 4, maybe 5 times in here. But I think there's supposed to be like a joke a minute in this thing. And I was just like, yeah, it's not like any of them are groan-worthy. There's like maybe like 1 or 2 groan-worthy ones. But it was just a lot of me just sitting there.
Just meh.
Yeah, it's like, yeah,
just
it's
meh.
like, I feel like, yeah, it's not like it's a bad joke, but I don't feel anything for it. It's like it wasn't a funny joke either. Jeez. It's hard because I don't know where to start with it. Because I know I'm coming off like, oh, it's terrible. I just looked at the Rotten Tomatoes score, and it's like 22%. Like, it's not 22%.
It's not that bad. I mean,
I would go with like 50,
yeah.
maybe. Yeah, which still does not make it a great film. I will say that if you are a Ratchet and Clank fan, you're going to enjoy it more than most people.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I enjoyed it more than most people, because they did capture Ratchet, they did capture Clank, they did capture Quark, and those 3 characters are great characters. But I was thinking about this as I was leaving the movie, it's like, I don't know if I can really give this movie credit for creating 3 great characters, because they didn't create 3 great characters.
Maybe it's
they just successfully imported them from the game.
More like you can give the movie credit for
not fucking it up.
For representing them correctly or something like that.
Yeah, that's honestly, I think that's what I have to give them credit for. And the sad thing is, that's the state that video game movies are in, is that if you just actually get the character right, that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, that's kind of sad.
It is sad, but it's like, yeah, as somebody who likes these characters, I did like seeing them on the big screen. But I don't know if I can say that somebody who doesn't have that attachment to these characters will feel the same way.
Yeah.
Because I'll admit, like, when Clank popped up, I was already happy. Because I like Clank. I like that little laugh he gives. I love his voice. I love the actor who plays him. I love the little, like, design of his body. And I was like, so the moment he popped up and the moment he started speaking, I was like, yay, it's Clank! But I will also say, as a Ratchet and Clank fan, there's also going to be moments in which you're going to be mad. You are, because there's going to be moments in which they're going to put, like, Easter eggs in there. And there's one great Easter egg. Because Ratchet is the last of his species, and Clank is looking at him trying to figure out what species he is, and he sees him going through the databanks, and you see Sly Cooper and Daxter from Jak and Daxter go by. I was like, that was a great Easter egg. That was a great Easter egg. But there was like one moment in there that I just kind of got frustrated with at it, honestly, because there's a moment in which they're going through this base for the villain, and you see him activate a security droid, and I went, it's Mr. Zurkon! It's Mr. Zurkon! Zurkon is a great thing in Ratchet and Clank. He's this little robot that you can shoot out, and Mr. Zurkon then just goes around shooting the villains, but the entire time he's like, Mr. Zurkon will terminate you with extreme prejudice. Like, he talks like the biggest bads, like he's just this unstoppable killing machine. And it's funny because he's speaking in the third person, and he's this little tiny robot, and you see the Zurkons in here. There is a moment in which, like, yeah, they are attacked by Zurkons, and they're not clever. Like, the lines that they give them are not funny. It's just like, Mr. Zurkon will destroy you. I was like, alright, that's not what it is in the game. And, like, and that's the thing that frustrates me the most about this, is that it'd be one thing if this was like, you know, like Street Fighter or something, which is like, yeah, there's a story. There's a story in there, but it's, you know, it's like that much of a story, and there's no voice acting, there's no real writing or dialogue between characters, so I can judge this film so if it was like a Street Fighter film, I could judge the Street Fighter film entirely upon itself. This is a Ratchet and Clank movie, and the Ratchet and Clank video games have a story, they have characters, they have jokes, and the humor in the video games is better than the humor in this. Like, the video games are way funnier than this movie, and I was looking at the trailer for the new PS4 Ratchet and Clank game. The graphics are better on that than they were in this. This thing looks cheap.
Like we were talking about, I was like, it seems like this movie was meant to be a direct-to-TV movie rather than one that should be out in theaters.
In all honesty, if this was like a made straight for Cartoon Network movie, I would have been way happier with it.
Yes.
I would have been like, this is actually pretty good. Yeah, good for you guys. But because this is like a actually go to the theater kind of thing, I was like, wow, this is, it's flat. It's really flat. And also another thing, that if you're a fan of Ratchet and Clank, this frustrated me. I don't know if other people are going to feel this way, but this is one thing that frustrated me, which is that the big appeal of Ratchet and Clank, the thing that made it stand on its own and made it unique and different from all the other like platform games were the weapons. That's the big appeal of Ratchet and Clank, is that you have all these insane, crazy weapons, and there's hundreds of them. When Ratchet joins the Galactic Rangers, Quark gives him this glove and goes, just think about the weapon that you want from our armory and it will instantly pop into your hand. I was like, okay, so that's how they're going to explain it. And then they give him like this little tutorial, and it's kind of like the tutorials in the game in which you see like a little like cartoon figure using the gun and like showing the effect of it. And Quark is giving him the definition of what these weapons does and gives him the description of it. And you see like a little montage of him using it. But I didn't really get the character from the guns. I didn't really get any personality from them. That's the thing about the Ratchet and Clank weapons, is that they do feel like these crazy weapons. They do feel insane. The weapons that he goes through in that montage are like, this shoots a very high energy pulse beam. It's like, okay. This one shoots missiles. Okay. This one shoots a buzzsaw. And I was like, that was a little bit different, I guess. Then, throughout the rest of the film, we don't really get any of that. I mean, yeah, they're using weapons, but it could just be a regular blaster. Like, I got no feeling from these weapons until the very end.
Right.
In the very end, like there's a fight scene between him and Quark, and it is them using their weapons back and forth, but none of that had really been set up.
Right.
Like I said, they just pull out crazy weapons out of nowhere. Like Quark pulls out one that creates a tornado, and it's like, I get no real feeling from that because you just pulled out a Deus Ex Machina weapon out of nowhere. You just pulled out like a thing that makes a tornado. I've got no like lead up to that at all. Or like I give them credit because they realize the importance of the weapons. But like another example of it is that Dr. Nefarious is working with Councilman Drek. And I actually really like Nefarious in here.
Yeah.
He was one of the saving graces of this film. I thought he was a great villain in here. But he's the guy who invented these crazy weapons. And one of the most iconic weapons from Ratchet and Clank is the Sheepinator. You shoot it and it turns someone into a sheep. There's a moment in which again, spoilers, this is like a full-on spoiler discussion. There's a moment in which Nefarious crosses Drex, and he shoots him with the Sheepinator, and he just out of nowhere turns into a sheep, and he goes, aha, the Sheepinator, one of my favorites. And I was like, that was like the first time that I ever went, oh, I guess he's the guy who made the weapons.
Well, they did mention it before.
They mentioned he used to work with them, and he used to be their tech guy.
Yeah.
But like, throughout this entire film, I've never seen him like hold a weapon until then. So it was like, okay, but also it's like, the Sheepinator is a crazy weapon. You can't just go, bam, you're a sheep, done. I was like, you need like some kind of an introduction to it. Like, in the games, Ratchet does not build these weapons. He doesn't. He's not the guy who invents these crazy weapons. It does come from like this big corporation. And I think that in the later games they did say that Nefarious like had a hand in creating them. I forget some of the stuff from the later games, honestly. But I was thinking throughout, I was like, you need to give these weapons some kind of like personality and some way of like spotlighting the importance on them. And the movie opens up with Ratchet actually doing construction on this car, and he adds all these crazy features to it. So like, they're gonna make it so that Ratchet like takes these normal weapons and tinkers with them until they can do these crazy things, because he tinkered with his car and gave it all these crazy features that it didn't need at all. And so I was like, that's what they're going to do in order to give these weapons.
By car we mean spaceship.
Spaceship, yeah. And I was like, that's what they're going to do to give each of these weapons like a personal touch and give them like, explain the zaniness of them and explain like, you know, give us all an introduction to what they do and make the weapons important so that they're not just things. I know that's not what happens in the video game, but sometimes you do have to change things for the story structure of a movie, and I would totally be okay with that. No, it's, you know, it's bam, at the very end of this movie, just crazy weapons come out of nowhere. Which again, I would have been okay with Ratchet not being the guy who invented them. I'm fine with that. But I just needed like some kind of a feeling for these weapons, not like they were just pulling out crazy things at the end of the film.
Like, I always thought, like because Ratchet was, like, a huge fan of the, Galactic Guardians.
Galactic Rangers.
Galactic Rangers.
The Guardians of the Galaxy.
Different franchise, but who knows. But yeah, because he's, like, a huge fan of them, I felt like he was inspired by their weapons to add them to, like, the spaceships he works on.
Yeah, which, again, would have been a good explanation to... Again, I'm not saying that Ratchet needed to be the guy who invented the weapons. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying you needed some way to introduce an audience to it. In a game, you get introduced to it because you go through a big menu screen, and then they give you a tutorial before each of it, and then you play for the next hour with that weapon, so you yourself develop an emotional attachment to that weapon, and you get to really experience how cool it is. In a movie, you need to somehow work it into the story, and that's what I'm saying. And I really felt like they did, because yeah, they give him the little tutorial at the beginning, and then they just use regular blasters throughout the entire rest of this film until the very end when he fights with Quark, and then they're just pulling out all these crazy weapons that we've never seen before. And I was like, that you can't just throw it in there. You need to basically just give us some kind of... You need to put importance on these weapons. And one thing that kind of struck me towards the end is that at the very end of the film, Nefarious pulls out the Rhino, which if anybody has played Ratchet and Clank, you know the Rhino, rip you a new one. Yeah, it is one of the biggest, baddest weapons in the game. And when he says that, they've introduced weapons throughout this, but they've always introduced it by just pulling them out of nowhere. And it's like, yeah, this is what this weapon is. And then it's never seen again, and that's it. Alright. When he pulls this one out, he goes, the Rhino, the rip you a new one, and then it says in big bold letters, rip you a new one. As he's saying it, I was like, that would have helped a lot. to give it flavor. If every single weapon got an introduction like that, like if every single weapon, first off, don't like just forget these weapons exist throughout the middle of the film. Have them come up like, wait like 5 to 10 minutes before introducing a new weapon, and then when you do, give it that kind of an introduction. So that way we kind of go, okay, that's what this thing is. Maybe even have like a little tiny like, every single time that you do that and you have the big like text pop up on screen, then you go into the little cartoon animation to show like the tutorial of how to use it and the importance of it. Yeah, that would have just been another thing that would be like, okay, now I get the importance of these weapons, and also it just doesn't feel like crazy things are being pulled out of nowhere. It actually does feel like they are of importance to everything around us. So yeah, I felt like they really just dropped the ball on that, and like I said, at the end of the movie, just throwing them all in there, I was like, I don't have an attachment to any of this. It just feels like you were just making up whatever you need here. And I know you're not making them up. These are from the game. I didn't care. Like a great example of it is there's a giant robot in here, and he's very like rusty looking, and Clank realizes he's weak to water because it will make him rust. So Clank just runs over to the armory, just grabs a random gun and shoots it in the air, and a storm cloud appears over him and rains on him, and is like, I know that weapon from the game. In this movie, there is nothing leading into that. He just randomly grabs a weather gun. So like, yeah, that's one of my big problems with how they handle the weapons in this. Again, I know I'm being like super negative on this thing, but I'm also thinking in terms of like people who are not Ratchet and Clank fans, people who are just going into this to see a movie, and most of my positives for this thing come from my attachment to Ratchet and Clank. It comes from, I like these characters. I love seeing these characters interact. And yeah, there are some good jokes in here. Like I said, I got like 4 or 5 like legitimately good laughs out of this. Like there's a great one in here, which makes me think this has to have been from the Freebird guys, because those guys love just naming characters after like famous directors or famous movie tropes. Like I remember in Freebirds there was one really weird running gag in which they would have 2 scientists standing next to each other, and they would each have a different name, and when you put their names together, it formed the name of a famous director. It's like, Josh Whedon, go over there. It's like, yeah, that was a weird running gag throughout that. But there's one in here that is legitimately good, in which a robot gets thrown out of a window, and when it's thrown out of the window, it gives out the Wilhelm scream. And I'm tired of that scream because it always takes me out of a movie, and I always view it as being kind of lazy. It's like, you guys couldn't record a new scream. But then when they throw the robot out and it gives the Wilhelm scream, another robot runs out the window and goes, Wilhelm! I was like, that's actually a good twist on that joke. Okay, that was actually a good twist on it. So it's like, yeah, there are some clever jokes throughout this. What do you feel about the animation?
I thought it was okay. Like you said, the animation wasn't as great. Like, for example, there wasn't really much texture to...
Yeah.
There wasn't much texture to, like, Ratchet's fur or anything like that. It kind of felt flat, but...
Yeah.
I don't know, I wasn't sure if they were just, like, trying to recreate, like, the look of the video game or not.
Well, yeah, like I said, there's a one out right now on the PS4, and it looks better than this movie.
Yeah.
In fact, the one out on the PS4 is based on this movie. In fact, it's even called Ratchet and Clank, the game based on the movie based on the game. It's the name of the game. And it's like, yeah, it looks better. In fact, there's a moment in which he is flying around the city.
That's not him flying around the city.
We do this right next to a window, folks. There's nothing I can do. But yeah, there's a moment in which he's flying around the city, and the city, it looks kind of barren. It does. At least to me, and then when I watched that scene in the trailer for the video game, the city seems alive. There's stuff all over the place, and they're like, God, it's just so sad to see that the movie, which should be more polished than a video game. Not saying anything against video games, I'm just saying that typically movies have a higher budget and more people working on it than on a video game, is actually cheaper than the video game. It's like, the movie should be more polished than the video game, because it should give you something that makes you go, okay, there's a reason to specifically go and see these characters on the big screen. But if I can watch it and play it here in my living room and it looks better, then it's hard for me to really, like, really point towards anything of notice and anything that even implies why, if you're a fan of this game, you should go and see the movie. I will say, I think for kids it's going to be great. Mm-hmm. I do, yeah. The humor in here, like I said, the humor in here, I constantly found myself going, was that an actual joke? I don't know if that was an actual joke. But a ton of the humor in here was just like, person falls down, person gets hit, person,
a lot of slapstick.
A lot of slapstick, or a lot of jokes that you heard when you were 5. Mm-hmm. Like, not like, like preschool jokes, but just jokes that it's like someone gets ejected from a car that Ratchet was working on, and he goes, I want a refund! I was like, you know what, if I was a kid, I'd probably think that was kind of clever. I'd probably, laugh at that when I was, a really young kid. For kids, I think it's pretty good. Man, I can't really even think of anything else that I want to say about this film. It's not bad. It is not bad. But it is not good. I can't say it's good. Of course, that's just me. I think you were way more positive on this than I was.
Yeah.
How would you feel? I'm mostly just ranting here. How do you feel about it? Did you think good, bad, positive, negative?
I thought it was good. I did not think it was great. Considering that it was a video game movie, and video game movies are usually subpar, to say
the least.
I'd say this is definitely a step up and a step in the right direction.
Yeah, because honestly, the best video game movies I think of, I always point towards that first Mortal Kombat movie. I mean, that's dumb, but it's fun dumb. And honestly, after that, Silent Hill was okay. Final Fantasy Spirits Within I actually thought was pretty good, but it has zero to do with the game, so I don't feel good even counting that. Mm-hmm. Whereas this one is okay, it's passable. It's a passable film. I honestly don't regret having seen it.
Right.
But it is it's okay. It's an okay film. I think kids are really going to enjoy it. And I'll also say this is the other thing that is a positive, is that you take Resident Evil, the people who made those movies, they didn't know what the fuck those games were, and if they thought they did, they went into crazy town 5 minutes into it. There's thousands of other, well not thousands, but there's dozens of other video game movies out there that's the people who made it, they did not get this. The Super Mario. Jesus, what the hell was that movie even? That's, that was closer to Mad Max and Blade Runner than it was to Super Mario. This one you watch is this is indeed a Ratchet and Clank movie. But yeah, it's just a Ratchet and Clank movie where they didn't really know how to actually write a full story. It was more just people who knew yeah, okay, ABC, that's it. A perfect example, I feel, is that Clank crash lands, tells Ratchet, Councilman Drac is going to attack the Galactic Rangers. And then they get there, hey, they've already started attacking the Galactic Rangers. Alright, bing, bang, boom, come on, let's get this thing going. Alright, here we go. Or a perfect example is that when Ratchet is making all these modifications to this guy's car, he says he adds a magnet to it that can attract all metal, and the guy actually says to him, why would I need that? And he goes, I don't know. I was it's I get the joke. I get the joke is that this is a thing that you were going to need later on, but it doesn't feel like a joke. It feels like the joke, I think the joke was supposed to be that Ratchet just added any crazy thing to this car that he could think of, which is what made me think that he was going to be the guy inventing all these crazy weapons later on. But I think that was the joke, is that this was going to be just some crazy thing that he had on because he thought was cool, and that's the kind of guy that Ratchet is. He just wants to tinker and modify. But then the moment that they had that in there, I was just I know this is going to come back in later into the movie. And yeah, it's great when you can have something from earlier in the film come back for a big plot point, especially when it helps to save the day. But you have to actually make it feel like there was a purpose to it in the beginning. Whereas with this, they literally said, why did I need this? And I was you couldn't have thought of some reason for it. Because he was making it for this old guy. And he was just like, well, I know, like, you could have had Ratchet say, listen, at your age, I understand it's hard to pick stuff up off the ground. You know, you drop your keys down there, you drop your cane, here, a little magnet, gets it right back up to you. You know, some kind of an explanation. There was no explanation for it, and because there was no explanation, it just seemed that much weirder. Like, there is no reason for you to put this on his car. It was solely there because they were like, oh, it's going to come back later in the movie. It's like, no, duh, it's going to come back later in the movie because it didn't come now. There's nothing for it here now. And it's just stuff like that all throughout this film. And like I said, also, just the fact that so much of the humor it's not bad, it's just kind of like,
meh.
Yeah. You're like, alright, I can, yeah. But if you are a fan of Ratchet and Clank, I've said this before, but I'm going to get in my closing statement here. If you are a fan of Ratchet and Clank, you will get fan service enjoyment out of this. You will get the enjoyment of seeing those characters that you like on the big screen, and they actually are those characters that you like. This is not some bastardization, it's not some crappy adaptation, it's not some producer coming in here and saying, listen, this isn't going to work on the big screen. We got to make this completely different. We got to make this hard and edgy for all the kids out there, because that's what they want this day. It's like, no, it's Ratchet and Clank. They actually did put Ratchet and Clank on the big screen. The writing wasn't as clever as the games. It didn't look as good as the games. And they did kind of drop the ball on the weapons. But, yeah, like I said, you will get that fan service enjoyment. And for kids, it's fine. And if you have kids and they want to go and see this and you don't have any kind of attachment to Ratchet and Clank, it's not so bad that you're going to come out there like, oh my god, what was that? It's not the Chipmunk movies, for God's sake. Not even close. It's something that you can let your kids watch for an hour and a half and you'll be fine. Yeah, do you have anything else that you want to add? I've been pretty much dominating this.
Yes, but you pretty much said what I want to say, so...
Yeah, but like I said, you were more positive on this than I was. Is there any other positives that you want to bring up?
It's like, I think the reason why I was so positive is because I know how shitty video game movies can be.
Yeah.
And so, like, when I saw, like, the trailer for this movie, it's like, oh, good, it's not some realistic CGI bullcrap. Like,
yeah, they didn't do what they're going to do with the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. Which you heard about that, right? The Sonic the Hedgehog movie that's coming out, like, next year. It's going to be live-action actors, and then the CG Sonic and his friends get transported from their world into our world. It's like, no one has ever liked that ever.
Yes,
no one has
it did not work with the Smurfs, and I don't think it's going to work with Sonic.
It didn't work with He-Man. It didn't work with, like... Why the fuck are you doing that?
I mean, seriously, why transport characters in this new exciting world to our boring world when you can just have them stay in their own world?
Yeah, but don't you understand? Sonic's gonna get into all kinds of crazy and wacky adventures in our world. He's gonna eat a bunch of chili dogs from a guy on the street, and then the guy's gonna be like, oh, that costs money. He's gonna be like, oh, I don't have pockets, I'm just a hedgehog. That's gonna be hilarious. Oh my god, that's gonna be a joke in the fucking thing. You know it's gonna be it. God damn it. Alright.
I'm just like imagining like a sign just like, you know, skating down like the streets of San Francisco.
That's another thing. They have fucking San Francisco in his world already.
Exactly.
He rolls around it at the speed of sound.
So there's like literally no reason for this.
He's got places to go. He's got to follow his rainbow. God damn it. Ratchet and Clank, you guys are okay. I'm not even mad at you anymore. God damn, this is over.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Rolling around at the speed of